8.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russell Norman.
He is the co-leader of the Green Party, Russell Norman. Morning, Russell.
Good morning, Wammo.
Good morning. Now let's look at the Sky City deal that's being done with the government. They're going to build a convention centre, but they want some laws changed so they can have some extra gaming tables. Now let's look at this from a couple of angles. The government is saying that sure, there's going to be heaps of jobs created here, but on the other hand, let's look at the situation with Kiwi Rail. A whole bunch of redundancies down in Dunedin. Some high quality jobs down there. Some highly skilled jobs are going to China for the next lot of trains that are going to be put onto our own wee train set here in New Zealand. So bit of it's an odd sort of situation there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They seem to bend over backwards for some multinational corporations so that they can set up business here, the convention centre, and of course Warner's was the other one. And when it comes to Kiwi Rail, they basically aren't really willing to lift a finger, so that the train sets get built in New Zealand. It's quite a double standard.
Because that would have been a highly lucrative contract, would it not? For those trains to be built here, we've got the skills, we've got the people to do it. We were in a situation where jobs are needed throughout the economy, and we send it overseas. Just doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, there were different kinds of rail products that could have been made. So there was the kind of what are called the flatbed trucks, which just are pretty simple, and they could have easily been made down in Dunedin, and they're the ones they're sending over to China. And then there's the kind of electrical units. And the electrical units could have been made in New Zealand, but it would have required a bit more upskilling.
Right.
So there was two different options, but all of them are going overseas, and they're not really trying to make any of them here.
Was any of this for the Auckland rail system, for the commuter transport system?
No, that contract got let by the last government, and they let it to Korea, I think, was where Labour let the contract.
Are we making anything here anymore?
It's the thing is, the neoliberal ideology that Labour and National have embraced for since '84 says it doesn't really matter. You just get good at one thing and then that's what you do. And so the one good thing that they're focused on is the dairy sector.
Yeah.
And manufacturing doesn't count. But I mean, I would argue that we can't all be dairy farmers. And that the environment's already pretty much at capacity, and perhaps definitely over capacity. And so actually manufacturing is important. So, we need to actually invest in manufacturing. It's also much higher, return, enormously high return for manufacturing if it's done well.
Yeah. So getting back to the Sky City side of things, looking at it from another angle, you think that it just shows that our laws, once again, are up for sale?
Well, it does certainly appear like that. I mean, so Sky City says we'll pay $350 million, and what we want to buy is some law changes. And so those law changes are around allowing us to cause more harm with gambling, because we've got a whole bunch of rules around gambling because it causes significant social harm, and that doesn't produce a lot of good. There's restrictions on how many gaming machines Sky City can have and how many tables they can have and various other conditions. And so they want to be able to have more tables, more gaming machines in return for $350 million. So that means we've got to change the law to suit Sky City, which I think is really an outrage, to be honest.
Do you think we should just put a rate card up online for companies to look at and see how much each particular law costs?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I was talking about this last night. If there's laws we don't think are important, maybe $10 million a clause.
Yeah.
Medium-sized laws, $50 million a clause, and important laws, $100 million a clause. And if you want it under urgency, then you've got to pay an extra $100 million up front to get it forced through Parliament quickly. I mean, let's just be upfront. I mean, that seems to be what this government's doing. I mean, I've never. It really is extraordinary that now New Zealand laws really are up for sale.
Stick them all on Trade Me.
Yeah, well, I think we'd go international. I mean, let's see, put them on the New York Stock Exchange and sell them there or something. I mean, try to maximise the return we're going to get. We've got a lot of laws. I mean, if we sold them all off, we might be able to pay for the tax cuts for the top 10%.
But in all seriousness, of course, all this stuff happens behind closed doors, in the background, and a lot of it is done by lobbyists, isn't it? And the various amounts of access that lobbyists have to politicians in Wellington.
Yeah, I mean, internationally there's been a huge growth in the lobbying industry by all the different, businesses employ lobbyists, either in-house or they have specialist lobbyists. So the trend overseas has been to set up these registers of lobbyists so that everyone can see what they're up to. So the Greens we put up this members bill, which would set up a register so that you could see, at the very least, you could see what's going on. So which lobbyists are visiting which politicians and what it is they're talking about. You'd have to, if you were a lobbyist, you'd have to register and you'd have to actually declare your activity. So at the very least, we'd all know what the hell the lobbyists were up to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they wouldn't still do what they do, and you'd still have governments like this one that are happy to sell laws, but at least we'd know what they're up to.
Do you guys, the Greens, do you guys ever get lobbied?
We do, on occasion. We don't seem to get as much lobbying activity as other parties. I guess the lobbyists figure there's not that much point because we're a bit harder to lobby.
But you're not in power either.
Do. Yeah, we're not in power, that's right. But even previously, when our votes were necessary for all the legislation that went through, we did get some lobbying, but not a huge amount.
I mean, essentially it comes down to money, right? I mean, that's what a lobbyist does, is we'll contribute this amount of funds to your next campaign if you, to go this way on a particular law.
Well, I mean, I've never experienced it as crude as that, but, I'm sure that actually does happen, as crude as that. I mean, of course, you're not, that's totally unacceptable, and I imagine it happens in a much more subtle way than that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure lobbying is an important part of the democracy process, but there's a fine line between that and corruption, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if lobbying is just coming to someone either on your own behalf or on the behalf of someone else to make an argument about something, then, I think it's an entirely legitimate part of the process. But it should be transparent so we can all see what's going on.
Mm.
I mean, obviously, if it's connected with payment, then that becomes corruption, and that's a real problem. And I hope we don't have that, or we have very little of that in New Zealand.
Mm.
But we certainly think that the first step is to throw the light of sunshine on it, so we can all see what the lobbyists are up to.
Indeed, Russel Norman, co-leader of the Greens. Thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, very much.